In the southern region of Mesopotamia, just southeast of Babylon, there lies the small city of Ur, which is now known as Tel el-Makur of southern Iraq. Ur today is seen as a dry and sandy site in the middle of the desert. But back in the early Bronze Age, Ur began to grow its economic prominence. Eventually, in 2000 BC, Ur began to hit its peak, totaling a population of over 60,000 people and having several factories, living quarters, and merchant ships. Many of the archaeological discoveries we will soon discuss can be greatly attributed to these past activities. Ur was abandoned for 2,000 years, and during that time, there were shifting desert sands and floodwaters which resultantly buried many of the structures and complicated the future excavations. Nonetheless, the tallest structures, also known as ziggurats, remained exposed, which allowed for future archaeologists to have a guideline of where to dig. Due to the annual flooding of the Euphrates in Iraq, archaeologists have to continuously repair this site. Ur was discovered in 1850 by William Loftus, but was first excavated in 1853 by John George Taylor. During this excavation, he mainly used digging as his method to expose these ziggurats. Taylor worked on behalf of the British museums, and through his excavations found inscriptions left by the last king of Babylon, Nabonidus. In later years of excavation, particularly in the 1920s and 1930s, archaeologists such as Charles Leonard Woodley conducted larger-scale excavations where they used more advanced methods of excavation. Some notable processes used include trench excavations, where they dug long, narrow trenches to expose and study the layers of occupation and construction at the site, sieving and screening to sort through the soils and recover smaller artifacts such as bone and pottery fragments, and stratigraphy to acknowledge the sedimentation and difference in layers when understanding the chronological order of the site. These methods allowed for a more thorough exploration and uncovered numerous ceremonial sites, housing complexes, and cemeteries. Furthermore, Woolley ensured to employ extensive documentation of his findings, using photography and detailed note-taking to put out over 30 articles and books which outlined the description of the excavation and the information regarding ancient civilizations, as well as their domestic and religious activities. It is clear that this was an extremely effective excavation at the time, but when looking to more recent years in Ur's historical activities, certain events derailed the preservation of Ur's history. In 2003, looters broke into the National Museum of Iraq and stole several pieces from Ur's collection of cultural heritage. Today, more than 8,000 artifacts remain unrecovered from this vandalism and has left many gaps in our understanding of the ancient city. While we are fortunate that Ur was a well-documented city for its time, it's important to note that this lack of foundational information when conducting further research today often leads to certain confusions. Woolley's excavation in Ur is said to have had a major impact on the strategies of excavation through the 20th century.
His emphasis on stratigraphic excavation,
as well as diligent note-taking and reporting, paved the way for the standard of archaeological practices moving forward today. Additionally, his use of interdisciplinary collaboration, making use of the skills of both archaeologists, architects, and preservation specialists, also became a standard in the archaeological research, which remains prevalent today. Although archaeological practices were able to run smoothly during the time, it's important to note that influences of the British regime in Iraq occurring during this time, and how Britain's authority often tainted the ultimate goals of the excavations. Many times, archaeologists' findings were used to further support historical narratives brought on by the British, and therefore altered our interpretations of the artifacts of Ur. Especially due to the heavy instances of war throughout Iraq, such as the Mesopotamian campaign from 1914 to 1918, the Mahmud Barzanji revolts from 1919 to 1924, and the Anglo-Iraqi War during the Second World War, as well as many, many more wars. It is reasonable to assume that an incredible amount of history in Ur was destroyed and negatively affected the process of artifacts during the excavations. It's reasonable to assume that an incredible amount of history in Ur was destroyed and negatively affected the processing of artifacts during excavations. As well, since these projects were mostly funded by the British government, international collaborations on sites such as Ur were quite common. This presence of foreign partnerships could further contort the information gained from excavations, as well as its influence by power dynamics and nationalist constraints. Archaeologists today would squirm at the mere thought of the innumerable techniques that were used in ancient excavations that are studied today. When examining the excavation of Ur, a major concern that is seen is the treatment of delicate artifacts such as burial remains and skeletons, which were likely treated the same as a normal piece of pottery. As well, the intervention of British colonists raised ethical concerns of the proper understanding and respect in Ur's cultural heritage and history, which was sometimes rewrote to the advantage of the Europeans. Finally, practices used today to ensure ethical standards, such as community involvement and consultations with stakeholders, were likely not even considered as an option during the time. Reflecting on the site and the importance it holds in the history of archaeology, the excavations of Ur established several advancements that have improved standards of today's practices. Firstly, Woolley and his team's insights on the civilization of Ur and their urbanized society challenged previous understandings of ancient populations. They uncovered several features which proved economic, political, and religious activities during that time. The excavations showed researchers that ancient cities did have aspects of growth and prosperity during their times of occupation, and debunked speculations of lacking innovations. Additionally, Woolley's usage of photographs and extensive note-taking, both, as previously stated, elevated standards of archaeological recording and expanded public engagement in archaeology as a greater number of resources became accessible. Finally, archaeologists of Ur discovered several royal tombs and notable artifacts which remain an integral part of modern-day museums. As well, their ability to integrate professionals from diverse fields of expertise paved the way for future excavations to utilize said resources and resultantly led to more successful discoveries today.